The Warrior and the Shadow, a tale of knowing yourself and your enemy. Long ago, in a kingdom nestled between towering mountains and lush valleys, there was a legendary warrior named Aaron. Renowned for his strength and skill, Aaron had never lost a battle, but his victories did not come from brute strength alone. Aaron had been trained from a young age by a wise master who taught him the most important lesson of all. Know yourself, know the enemy, fight 100 times, win 100 times. Aaron took this teaching to heart, spending years understanding his own strengths, weaknesses, and limits. He practiced relentlessly, honing his skills and learning how to control his mind as well as his body. But Aaron did not stop there. He knew that to succeed in battle, he needed to understand not only himself but also his enemies. Whenever he faced a new foe, he would study them, watching their movements, learning their strategies, and understanding what drove them to fight. One day, news reached Aaron that a mysterious warrior known only as the Shadow had emerged in a neighboring kingdom. The Shadow was said to be unbeatable, an invisible force that struck swiftly and vanished without a trace. Villages trembled at the mention of the Shadow, and no warrior had ever returned victorious against him. Naturally, Aaron was curious. He decided to seek out this enigmatic opponent and learn more. Aaron traveled across the mountains, asking villagers and fellow warriors about the Shadow. He pieced together what little information he could find, but no one knew much about this elusive figure. Eventually, Aaron reached a small village where he learned the Shadow was expected to pass through that very night. Aaron waited patiently in the darkness, his senses alert. At midnight, a figure appeared, cloaked in shadows and moving with the silence of a breeze. Aaron did not attack. Instead, he watched as the Shadow moved through the village. He noticed that the Shadow moved with a slight limp and favored his left side, a weakness almost imperceptible to anyone not looking for it. Aaron also observed the Shadow's strategy, quick, calculated strikes followed by a retreat into the darkness. The next day, Aaron approached the villagers and asked why the Shadow fought. They told him that the Shadow had once been a noble warrior who had lost everything in a battle for his kingdom. He now fought not out of malice, but as a desperate attempt to regain a sense of purpose in a world that had left him broken. Aaron pondered this information and realized that the Shadow was not simply a physical opponent. He was a man who had become a prisoner of his own sorrow. Aaron knew that to defeat the Shadow, he would have to understand not just his enemy's weaknesses, but also his own motives for fighting. On the following night, Aaron and the Shadow met in a silent glade beneath the full moon. They circled each other, two skilled warriors who knew the weight of battle. Aaron moved deliberately, avoiding the Shadow's initial strikes, biding his time. He could sense the Shadow's frustration as he failed to land a blow. Finally, Aaron spoke. "I know why you fight," he said, locking eyes with the Shadow. "But do you? You seek victory, but you are at war with yourself more than with me." The Shadow paused, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Aaron lowered his weapon and said, "You have been consumed by a battle you cannot win, because you fight against your own sorrow. You are strong, but strength alone cannot defeat what haunts you." The Shadow's shoulders sagged, the weight of his loss visible on his face. He seemed to understand then that Aaron knew him, knew his pain, his despair, and the fear that drove him. In that moment, the fight drained out of him. The Shadow let his weapon fall to the ground, and for the first time, he was truly seen, not as an invincible warrior, but as a man who had been hiding from himself. Aaron offered him a hand, saying, "You can choose a different path. You don't have to fight forever." The Shadow took Aaron's hand, and together they walked out of the glade, two warriors who had found peace not through combat, but through understanding. Aaron had won, but not by force. He had won by knowing himself and by knowing his enemy's true heart. He understood now that some battles were not meant to be fought, but to be transcended. Through this encounter, Aaron had once again proven the wisdom of his master's words. Know yourself, know the enemy. Fight 100 times, win 100 times. The greatest victory was not in defeating an opponent, but in bringing light to the shadows within.